All right. Welcome to Reflect, Recalibrate. Whoop, whoop, whoop. We are your lovely lady artivist hosts, the lovely Jana E. Dandridge, and myself, Danny Snyder. This is a special episode. I'm stoked. In this episode, we are educating ourselves on our rights as artists. That's a good topic, pretty important topic, right?
Yes, 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 it is.
It's funny because we posed this question to our fans and followers on the social medias, which if you're not following us, you should be. We posed this question yesterday asking our folks, what do you know as your rights as an artist when law enforcement is trying to halt your production or remove your work from a public space? And we're going to give a minute for our listeners who are tuning in live with us to see if they have any responses to this. But I will say, what was funny was that when we posted this yesterday, a lot of people responded and said, that's a good question. I don't know. And these are artists who are saying, I might have to listen to this episode. And I'm like, you should listen to all the episodes. But yes, definitely tune into this one.
Yes. So I'm going to share that question in the chat as soon as I can get it copied from our information. And while that's happening, I'll say I've had to look into multiple spaces for artist rights because of the nature of my work performing in the
Yeah.
public. So I've had to look at the National Park Service, what their policies are. I've had to review different cities that I'm in, their policies. And this is just from the USA to international locations. And I've also had to communicate with lawyers often. Even with all of that, I feel like I'm still not well versed in all of my rights as an artist. And I know that things come up and then you find the information so that you can utilize it at that time because, we're busy people and we're trying to acquire all this info. And I'm not a lawyer, so it's not just readily available. But what I've found in my experience is there's so many different policies and
Oh,
laws
yeah.
that can determine how you're going to perform, that sometimes you have to shift location, for example,
Mhm.
and people don't really want to do that. You might have a specific location that is a signifier for the work that you're doing in some kind of way. But because of the laws or policies that are there, you'll have to move yourself into a different space. And sometimes when you think certain spaces have specific policies and laws, they don't.
Interesting. Interesting.
Now, let
Okay.
me go ahead and share that question in the chat.
Hey, so, we didn't talk about this before, Rahan, so I might be putting you on the spot here. But Jan and I actually met one time in person, and it's when I came to see an environmental art piece that she was doing in DC. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that process was like because you had to get a permit for that, correct? Oh, she's doing her technical director thing. She's giving me the 1 minute, please. One moment. I know. You're an artist, man. You can multitask. Come on. But yeah, so Jan and I actually got to meet for it was funny. It was during COVID. So I saw her perform from a distance. And then afterwards, we kind of air hugged and we were like, okay, it was good to meet you. And then we went our separate ways. And this was before we had actually started the podcast. So one day we'll actually do a podcast episode together in the same space. And I will get to
Gosh.
hold Mahelu and,
Exactly, right.
yeah.
So did I have to get permits for that particular work? So the work that Danny is referring to is called Amendment Nail of a Nation, and it is the participatory creation of a new social contract. I did that work in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, one of those places where you think, oh, you know what? I can't do anything here. That work involved fire.
That's true. I forgot.
Smoke, a, a gathering of in the public. And what I needed to do specifically, first and foremost, was like, okay, can I do fire in a public space on Capitol Hill, period, in public space? And DC is unique because you have so many areas that are part of the National Park Service. So
Hmm.
when I looked into what I could do, I found out that I had to go into the website or look into the website and information on the National Park Service website, not DC, the city, right?
Yeah.
And when I read through it, I was happy to find out that I could actually do a little fire. Now, you cannot have a bonfire, but what I did in that work, that particular iteration, was in these little sort of what are those, like bread pudding or just loaf of bread aluminum containers.
Oh, oh.
I
I was like,
stuck,
where are we
yeah,
going?
I was like, here, yeah, yeah. You know, as artists creating and figuring out what to use. So I purchased these little bread loaf aluminum containers where I could put the material in that I was burning.
Hmm.
And since it was this small object that I was using and burning, it wasn't considered a fire that would, create havoc. Even though
Hmm.
fire can, depending on what you do, you can, from any type of small fire to a big fire, it can create a problem. It was controlled, right?
Hmm.
And I also had materials on hand just in case, like water, just in case something went left. The other item or the other task that I had to complete to do this work in the public was to find out how to manage the police officers just in case they came over and said, hey, you cannot do this, right? Permits, right? So I had on deck the information from the National Park Service, the code and all of that, so that I could say, hey, no, I actually can do this. Here is the current code. Here's the website you can go to. Here, I can show you the website, right? And then I also had to talk to two organizations, and the one that came out, I believe, was Cop Watch. And Cop Watch ensures
Mm.
or helps in maintaining civility. So if there was a situation that came up that seemed to be going in a direction of violence and the police came out, and unfortunately, we know that there are some officers who are trigger happy. Instead of people going against the police on their own, Cop Watch is able to help in managing that relationship and talking the situation down, de-escalating, right? And so I had to do that too because I'm in a public space. The work that I was doing and the work that it involves the USA flag and my dismantling of it. So that could have caused problems for myself, for my assistants, for the public. And so I'm concerned about everybody, right, in doing work. And I definitely was concerned about my nephews who were playing the role of my assistants, these young Black boys. I was highly concerned about them. And so my family was there also. It was just like a lot of different layers to assist in doing this work. And there were people documenting as well. So, yes, there are all of these tools that you have to use to be able to do what we do. And I have to plug in my computer real quick.
You didn't plug your computer in? Bad
Oh my
podcast
gosh.
co-host. Bad
It was
podcast
plugged
co-host.
in. It was plugged in and then I took it out. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, just having to do all those things. It's crazy. Um
Blame it on the cat. I'm sure it was the cat's fault.
Gia didn't do nothing. I can't blame her. But it was necessary. No problem. I enjoyed learning something new. I enjoyed understanding what I could do in DC legally with fire
Hmm.
in the public.
With fire. Um, did you actually run into any issues with officers? I don't remember seeing
No,
anything like that. Yeah.
no, I didn't. The only issue, if you recall, there was a person who walked past and he said, disgraceful, when I was doing the work.
Oh, I do remember that. I do remember
And so
that.
who knows what that could have turned into, but like my
Yeah.
family was there ready, people who were participants are who were participating, people were there. They were ready, right? So it was good that I had, the folks from
Hmm.
Cop Watch, right, who were there,
Hmm.
um and also that I knew my rights.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, we do have a comment in the chat, Danny. Should I go ahead and
Awesome.
share
Yeah,
that right
go for
now?
it.
So this person says, even if there are rights right now, I do not trust having any rights in the present moment, only perhaps later in a court of law. And that's is an if.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, earlier when you were saying, "Oh, I feel like I've done this and I've done this and I've done this and I still feel like I'm not very well versed." I wonder myself, I've had lots of different opportunities in different localities to in different ways learn my rights, understand permits. Uh, I've had opportunities to learn the language of law, right? Like when I'll never forget the first time I had to write my own contracts. I was like, okay, I got to learn how to write like a lawyer so I don't have to pay a lawyer. Um, even with all that experience, I still don't feel well versed. I still don't feel confident in knowing my rights. But I also wonder if that's because of the way enforcement approaches people, if like the way I see it in protest, the way I see it in media, if I'm supposed to be made to feel like I don't actually know what I'm talking about and that they'll figure out a way to manipulate. And I'm speaking very broadly, right? I don't feel like every officer or every if it's National Park Service person, I don't feel like they're all out against me, right? But I'm wondering if I have this mindset of like they're going to gaslight me, they're going to manipulate me, they're going to find a way to convince me that I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I might have that document right here. You know what I'm, do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. I I think that just comes down to a matter of being confident in
Right.
what you're doing and not allowing for someone to tell you that you don't know what you're doing, especially when we know that's the case. And to our viewers' point, yeah, yeah, right now it's like whatever. Law, what? I mean,
Yeah.
the executive branch is just like, I don't care about rules, regulations,
Yeah.
policies. You know what I mean? So yeah, why would anyone else, right, in those type
Hmm.
of authoritative positions? But we still do have these methods to defend ourselves and to do the work the way that we do. And we still have to understand that those spaces and methods are in place and we can utilize them, even if we are continuously bombarded with the fact that the office, the highest office in the land, as they say, right, is just completely disregarding all kinds of
Yeah.
laws,
Yeah.
regardless. They're being taken to court and sometimes people win. You know what I mean? So I think the bottom line is to know that those routes to, I'll say, quote, justice are there for us, and making sure we're aware of our rights and utilizing our rights and being confident and having people with us when we're doing these works, because we don't want to
Yeah.
be by ourselves. And this is one of those things that comes into play with know your rights,
Hmm.
NYR campaigns, period. You want to have someone or some people with you. You want to have a system set up. It's something to do. It's not tedious. You can talk to a friend and say, hey, you're going to be my contact. Hey, I'm going to have this performance. I need you and you. Can y'all please be there? If this happens, I want you to call my family and the police. If they can't do it, I want you to be the second contact to be able to do whatever needs to be done. You know what I
Mm-hmm,
mean?
mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm,
have to do those things and take those steps.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which I
How
think
about you?
go ahead.
Go ahead, Danny. Sorry.
I was going to say that, we can lead into that conversation too. What kind of steps could we take as we're preparing for an environmental piece in a public space? Or again, it could be maybe on a national park service property. We could also talk about private property as well, but we can jump into that conversation about steps. Did you have a follow-up thought though first?
Well, I was just curious, have you run into any of this? I don't remember if you said that you have or have not, but in dealing with your rights
Um,
as an artist in public spaces.
I've always been, to be honest, and I'm a little embarrassed about this, but to be honest, when I've gone to protest, I've been very, very careful about where I position myself and how I contribute because as an educator, I have to be very careful about not getting arrested. So, I get nervous about what that could ultimately do to my career in education if I have any kind of arrest on my history. So, luckily, all the protests, I would say, like for the most part, have been really, really peaceful. There might have been someone like your person, like disgrace, coming by and trying to escalate things. There might have been altercations between other pedestrians and onlookers, but not to a point where it got like an officer throwing someone down on the ground sort of thing. But again, that's because I've been very careful about what kind of protests I do and how I get involved. So I have not worked with Cop Watch before, but I have been to protests where we had maybe a committee. I would say more like a committee, like a group of people who were designated to de-escalate situations. So if they saw an onlooker getting aggressive with a protester, how they can de-escalate that situation so it doesn't end in violence. So I've seen that in play. I will say though, I think we could have better training in how to de-escalate things. Because I feel like a lot of times these committees, they're also protesters and they're also passionate about the thing that's being protested about. So sometimes their de-escalation would turn into like, oh, I'm going to debate with you and tell you why what we're doing is important rather than what we're doing is our right. This is our right to do this. You know what I mean? There's a difference, right? You see what I'm saying? So I think that would be awesome if we could offer more training across the board to anyone who's protesting and doing environmental art pieces that are dealing with controversial issues where there might be, guys walking by saying disgrace and trying to start a fight or something. I get very nervous too, just about like, especially the area I live in, like I feel like everyone's packing, and I'm always like, I personally don't like the idea of trying to do a controversial piece in a public space because I'm very scared of gun violence. So, um, that though I have not experienced, but I've definitely, I've seen people just walking down the street and they have a gun on them. And I'm like, awesome, we're just doing a protest here. And that person's walking down the street with a gun. I feel super safe.
Wow. And
Yeah.
for those of us who don't know what packing means, it means you have a gun on your body, ready to use if necessary, or if not necessary. But yeah,
Yeah.
packing.
Yeah.
Better training.
Yeah. Yeah.
Better training. That's
Because to
important.
me, I'm actually interested in doing that. Like when I found out, for example, I'm not going to say their name, but I found out one of my friends had had some training in de-escalation and that was going to be their job at this one protest. They were going to help de-escalate any kind of conflict that came up. But this person can get very aggressive also and very passionate about the issues. And then so I actually I did not feel like she was doing a good job de-escalating. She was missing the point of it, of like, let's try, in my opinion, having actually honestly not really taken any proper like protest de-escalation training. I've just taken like conflict resolution kind of classes, but it should be more about, ultimately finding some empathy and just understanding that we all have our different viewpoints. We all have our rights to express those views. So it really shouldn't be about ultimately trying to persuade or, because I'm also, that's one of my most to me, that's the thing I think about the most when I'm in a protest is how do I get onlookers to join, to feel welcomed and to feel invited to join the march or whatever the theatrics are. And so if there's someone who's obviously very opposed to what we're doing, I'm not going to push them to join, right? At that point, I'm going to be like, well, at least let's find a common ground. And I felt like my friend was almost like pushing to them, like shaming them for not being a part of the march. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not what, that's the complete opposite of what we're trying to do. Like shame is like that. There's sometimes an appropriate place where shame is an appropriate tactic, where anger is an appropriate tactic. But I felt like in that in this de-escalation moments, no, that's not the tactic.
Yeah, and that's why you call people who have training, right? And who are sort of removed in a way or can remove themselves in a way so that they can speak from an unbiased place,
Yeah, more
possibly,
neutral.
or neutral. But gosh, it's so challenging to use those words when it comes to rights. Neutral and
Yeah.
unbiased, right?
Yeah.
But that's why there's people who are psychologists and sociologists. They have their opinions, but they also understand how to de-escalate or connect with someone to de-escalate, right?
Right. Right.
So
Did that answer your question? I feel like I
yeah,
tangented a
yeah.
little bit,
No,
but
no, no. That is because we're talking about in public spaces, right? So that
right.
involves performance, right? Different types of performance. That involves visual art, right? That involves all of these works that I think we're talking about that we've experienced. And what I think we can go into now is speaking to DC specifically,
Hmm.
especially since most recently
Yeah.
DC was the target of the Trump administration when it comes to holding federal funds, withholding federal funds. And DC is a unique situation because it is a city, and Congress still can veto or override what the DC Council says they want to do in DC, right? The
Hmm.
citizens of
Hmm.
DC, they can still
Hmm. Hmm.
override that, right? So maybe we can get into the specifics of those types of outdoor performances and visual arts in
Hmm.
DC. I know we started with my work, but what we both were doing, we were researching, and man, there's so much more to research.
Oh
But
yeah.
we were looking at the DC Council Code, right? And again, even though we have this DC Council Code, Congress can still say, "Oh no, 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 we can't do that. We're not doing that." So let's talk about the Black Lives Matter mural. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that, Daddy. And you
Yeah.
you put this into our notes. And so can you talk about that situation, please?
Yeah. So this removal was, I mean, if we're
Okay.
asking why it happened,
Well,
we
wait.
have, sorry, we have the
Yeah, let's
Black
back
Lives
up.
Matter mural. Sorry, I always assume everyone knows this mural because it's huge. It's huge, right? Actually, I don't actually know how big it is. I'm gonna see if I can look that up real quick. But um, it was done during the protests, these huge protests during the pandemic. And the removal, why it was removed is because President Donald Trump's administration pledged to eliminate wokeness from American society. So, um, I the thing that kind of boggles my mind, I was actually struggling to find the final amount of money that was spent in removing this huge mural, but it was projected to be about $610,000. So I don't know if that was the final. I would bet it's even more, honestly. Let me see if I can look up how big. Oh, I see Janet wrote in a text it covers 2 city blocks, but DC city blocks are huge, by the way. How big Black Lives? And I
It's a
know there
city.
was like, um, let me see if I can look it up, how big it was. 48 feet in width, with the letter standing about 35 to 50 feet tall. Like
Yeah,
it's
basically it
huge.
went across the street. I mean, because the whole street it was covered, it was blocked off. I've been there visiting family and just,
Hmm.
walking. But yeah, it was huge.
Um, and the mural itself, let me see how long it took to do. I actually don't know how long it took, but I believe it was 7 main artists that worked on it. Um, and Oh, it was painted under 8 hours. That's amazing. So basically one day they were like, okay, let's do this. But now, that plaza, it was renamed the Black Lives Matter Plaza, but now I guess it's under threat of being renamed again. Janet, for those of you who are just listening and not watching, is massively eye rolling at me right now.
Not at you, at the situation.
Yeah. 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 Um, But yeah, the date it was done was June 5th, 2020. And then when it was removed, so it was only up like, yeah, not even 5 years. It wasn't even up 5 years. And actually, how long did it take for them to remove it? That's so funny to
I mean,
remove.
the images, if you all take a moment
Six to
and
eight weeks. That's hilarious. It took
that
about
doesn't
eight,
make it
six to
doesn't
eight
make any
weeks to
sense.
remove it, and it took eight hours to put it up.
It doesn't make any sense. Like it really makes no sense. The money that was spent, the time that was spent to remove a historical marker, because that's
Yeah.
what it was. It was directly a result of the George Floyd murder and the protests. It
Right. Which I mean, I do want to recognize that it it's not specific to George Floyd, but yes, that's what launched initiated a lot of these protests. But there were many other many other Black lives that were recognized and that were honored during this process. And I'm so bummed that I never got to see it. I
it
never got to see
mm.
it. Did you ever get to see it? Because
Yeah,
you've
that's
you've been in DC a couple
yeah.
times since it's
Yeah.
been up.
I walked along the path and the energy, the feeling of love that it gives you, the hope that it gives you, because people need that. We need that. And
Yeah.
now for it to be destroyed because fools want to withhold funding that is necessary for a city to function, for the American citizens, for the United States of America citizens to be able to have the resources they need. It's it's just all of it is infuriating, right? And this is why
Yeah.
it's like you have to do relaxation uh exercises all the time. Um what I want to share right now, Danny, I just want to share
Hmm.
the I guess the bill language because I thought that was significant in how the bill was written.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
the HR 1774 in Congress. And what it says to amend Title 23, United States Code, to withhold certain apportionment funds from the District of Columbia unless the mayor of the District of Columbia removes the phrase Black Lives Matter from the street symbolically designated as Black Lives Matter Plaza, redesignates such street as Liberty Plaza,
Yep.
and removes such phrase from each website, document, and other material under the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia.
Thank you for reading that. I did not have that. Yeah. Did it actually though officially get changed to Liberty Plaza? I know they were talking about doing that, but did they actually do it? Do you know?
I don't know.
It's a good question. But
Let's look
yeah.
it up.
So here's
I can
one
look it up.
example of whitewashing, which is happening a lot right now, and it's in the news a lot, especially Florida, all the gay pride intersections and murals. And so that's what led me to creating kind of like a step outline guide for I was, just as I was going through my notes and going through my research, and this could be something, that I use or something that people could use in the future. But, especially looking at what was happening in Florida and how, for example, there's this famous intersection that's got the gay pride flag drawn across the intersection. And Ron DeSantis is arguing that like, oh, this is distracting drivers and we have to get rid of it. The same way if you walk down Black Lives Matter, you're going to become more woke, and that's dangerous to people apparently. So they spent a stupid amount of money to remove this mural, but now the artists are looking for ways to use private property surrounding the plaza to paint other gay pride murals. And the city is talking about how on the light posts to adding gay pride flags to the light posts. So ways in which they can, within their legal rights, put that representation out there. So that was one thing I was thinking about is like, okay, whether I'm going to graffiti illegally or whether I'm going to, actually get permission to do this and run the risk of someone getting mad later and whitewashing it, how I can build relationships with everyone surrounding the area, the private businesses. One thing that I found on this one legal website that I thought was very enlightening was that what was the website? It was regarding the Visual Artists' Rights Act, which I honestly didn't really know a lot about until I came and started doing this research. But this one website with Giselle Ayala, it's a lawyer that specializes in legal rights for artists, which we'll put this link in our resources in our show notes. But one thing that she wrote on there was, it is advisable that artists make efforts not only to discuss with building owners, landlords, curators, managers, among others, about their work and their value, but also to make themselves known in the art community. The more exposure an artist has, the better chance the artist has to protect his or her work and to attain said recognized stature. So that's in quotes, recognized stature, which can be used in court to protect your work, the value of your work. So that was one thing I was thinking about. It's like as I go into this process of like really building relationships with all the people surrounding the area. So hopefully my mural, graffiti, whatever would not be whitewashed, but in case it is, then maybe I can go talk to this private business owner and be like, hey, remember that awesome mural I did that you loved? Can we do it on your wall instead? Or whatever.
Yes, you have to communicate with the community in which you work.
Duh.
And right, it's like, I mean, it it makes sense, right? Because if you specifically if you're creating a mural, right, you probably got in permission. You probably received permission from the owner of that business. If you didn't, and it does go into what is it? Because this came up too within that protecting artistic vandalism, graffiti, and copyright law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Graffiti as a visual work under copyright law. So even with graffiti that people believe, it's like, no, it shouldn't be there. Graffiti artists also have rights,
They
right?
do. Mm-hmm.
Right. So working with the community, knowing, as they say, the stakeholders, who are the community members, right? Because they are
Mm-hmm.
the important folks. Understanding who wants what, being able to use that to your advantage when going into these conversations where someone's trying to remove your artwork. Hey, I've spoken to the community board, I've spoken to the community council, and they want this mural here. So have you all spoken to the community board, the community council? And are they okay with you removing this mural? Right? So leveraging that relationship so that the community and the artists are able to continue to benefit from the mural. I mean, beautifying an area or remembering people in the community who have passed away, or providing information via a mural for community members and people who are visiting to understand that community further, all of it is important. So knowing your rights as a muralist in public
Mm-hmm.
spaces is important. We
Mm-hmm.
have to know what we can do and cannot do. And when you feel like, oh, I don't really know, there's so many resources out there for you to get information from. And then there's lawyers. There's pro bono lawyers for
Mm-hmm.
artists. In
Mm-hmm.
DC, you have Washington Lawyers for the Arts, and they can connect you to lawyers who will provide services pro bono, or who will give you legal advice. And this is in many different places. When I lived in California, there were I don't know what the name of the group was, but it was Los Angeles Lawyers
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
artists. But we have these resources that we can use to our advantage. Um, One of the things I was looking at within the research was how public art and its purpose is described, the purpose of public art. And I think this is
Oh, I see what you're saying.
the way it's described, the language that is used, that it doesn't it doesn't seem helpful. And the language that is used, and I can read from what is in the DC definitions of public art, which is 39-202 Council of the District of Columbia Code number 10. Public art, it gives the definition, means sculptures, murals, mosaics, bas reliefs, frescoes, tapestries, monuments, fountains, environmental designs, and other visual art forms that are intended to enhance the aesthetic quality of a public building, park, street, sidewalk, or other public place with which they are physically and spatially connected. The part that stood out to me is to enhance the aesthetic quality, right? It's not only about the aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, it can be about the history of a community that is outlined in a mural. So that when a visitor is coming to that community to enjoy it, they know what's happened in that community. They know who the people are in that
Mm-hmm.
community.
Mm-hmm.
It's way more significant. Aesthetics are lovely, right? We're artists, right? However, it's not the only element. So if this is in the code, and this is DC code, if this is in that code, then how are individuals going to continue to look at the role of artists? Artists are only here to help us see things, or artists are here to create stuff that's beautiful so we can enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what's interesting too is this public art is it's really talking about visual art forms too. Is there like I'm looking at these codes now. I guess there's not really one for Okay, well here up here, number two, it says arts includes instrumental music, vocal music, because this is what I was wondering about, like performance. So this includes dance, drama, folk art, creative writing, architecture, and allied fields. Oh, it also says painting, sculpture, photography, graphic and craft arts, industrial design, costume, fashion design, media, film, sound recording, disciplines related to the presentation, performance, execution, exhibition of those major art forms, and the study and application of the arts to the human environment. So I guess for public art, that's like more art specific, like you said, that's meant to enhance the aesthetics of a building or something. Um, but there's not really like a public like theater kind of definition at all. I don't see that anywhere here. Um,
Are you referencing performance art or
I was wondering about performance art too. Yeah, because that was one of the
mm,
things we talked about before was performance in a public space as well, and knowing your rights to that too. So that's why I was curious when I'm looking up at these codes now, which we will definitely put these codes into the the resources below. I'm so glad Janet likes reading these codes. And these like bills. Man, reading bills, it's overwhelming to me sometimes. I'm like, say what? Like one of them I was reading earlier where it was explaining how artists' rights were waived. I was like, the language, I was like, wait a minute, what? I was getting so confused reading it, and that's what sometimes I feel like is their intention to confuse me so that I don't understand it. Like sometimes I wonder if that's the purpose of it.
I mean, I think sometimes it is. And that's why you have to go to the lawyers and say, hey, can y'all just synthesize this for me?
Hmm.
Because I'm not sure I understand. Speaking to your point, there in that visual uh, arts, I'm sorry, not visual arts, it's Visual Artists Rights Act of 1990.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a little bit of confusion in there.
Hmm. Hmm.
For example, it's HR 2690, if anyone wants to look it up right now, HR 2690 of the 101st Congress. It says, and it's talking about the author being the artist. So grants,
Hmm.
okay, I'm just going to read the whole thing. Why not?
Okay. It's short.
Visual Artists Rights Act of 1989 amends the copyright law, which is dealing with copyright, right? So then you have to look into copyright to define a work of visual art, grants the author of a work of visual art the right to claim authorship of such work when publicly displayed, independent of other exclusive rights, and to disclaim authorship of such work because of substantial distortion or alteration that harms his or her reputation, grants such as or grants such an author the right to prevent any destruction, distortion, mutilation, or other modification of that work which would harm his or her reputation or honor, grants the author who is not a copyright owner such rights only during his or her lifetime, extends such rights 50 years beyond the author's death with respect to visual artworks created as of the effective date of this act. Then it says, waives artists' rights when a work cannot be removed from a building without distortion, mutilation, or alteration, unless such rights are expressly reserved by an instrument in writing. So I'm gonna stop right there because that's the
Hmm.
part
Hmm.
in relation to what you said,
I
Daddy.
was like,
Because
wait a minute. I was like, what? And then I saw you even when you saw my notes, you put even a little, wait, what kind of comment on it. And I was like, yeah, me too. Like, what does that mean?
what what in the what? What
Yeah.
in the what? That's what in the what? Oh boy.
Um, but yeah, I was very intrigued by this idea because I kept thinking about Banksy's work, and how people would literally like carve his work out of a wall and then auction it off. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's got to be some like someone's getting sued somewhere in this process. But yeah, no, that's what I was wondering. It's like, if I paint something on a wall and now someone destroys it, from what I'm looking at on a lot of these lawyers' websites, I've looked at so many lawyers' websites in the last few days. It's kind of silly, but it sounds like if you're doing it on private property, you didn't get the right to put it up on that wall, you're probably not going to have much of a chance for anything in an argument. But, you could try to argue that like someone has deconstructed, has destroyed your piece that you can claim the right to. You can claim the right to have making it, to have been, to be the author, right? But whether or not it could stay on that wall, and that's where it gets kind of tricky, and like probably should have gotten permission. And so, of course, me, I always get permission to do something like that. Well, I shouldn't say always. There might have been a couple of times in DC where I did some wheat pasting on different walls. But even
Mm-hmm.
then, I was pretty careful about what kind of walls I did it on, and where I was like, no one's probably going to take this down, or no one's probably going to complain too much about it here. Um,
Hmm.
but again, was playing it a little bit safer because trying not to get arrested. um, maybe I could show you that picture later of me almost getting arrested. But anyhow, I think like it's yeah, it's interesting to me, those kind of rights, those kind of copyright rights. Um, I honestly, in the case of the wheat pasting thing, for example, I wasn't in that moment in particular, I was not worried about the copyright. I was not worried about taking ownership of this image that I created. But I think that's what makes like people like Banksy cool, or that, these kind of artists that, get in their Batman capes and they go out and they wheat paste and they go home, and you never know who did it, and you don't know who made that art, and that's what makes it cool. Um, because then once you start really claiming the ownership, then it becomes about something else. Is it about the protest anymore, or is it about just you being recognized as this creator? So anyhow, I never really thought about that very much until we started opening up this conversation about rights as artists. But that was a big thing that was coming up in a lot of my research, is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
concern for the copyright.
Mm-hmm. And that's a whole series in itself.
That's true. That's true. Especially with AI. Whoo, wow.
That's a whole series within itself. Oh man, I've definitely listened in and participated in workshops on copyright, and I continuously go back to them
Yeah.
because it's so much information and it's different for the medium of choice.
Right. But I'm sure it's
So,
also changing pretty frequently too, no? Maybe not.
not from what I've experienced in the multiple workshops I've been to.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything drastically change within copyright law, but I think if it's another arena for us to explore, would be that's something that artists need to know. And also, we're bringing up all of these uh, bills, some of them that have become laws,
Yeah.
and that is important for artists to look into, to understand your federal rights, because the federal rights, I think, that oftentimes, but all the time, supersede the state
That's what
rights,
I thought, but
right?
not a
So it's
lawyer.
good to know, both state,
Yeah.
local
Oh,
and
yeah.
federal, but it's a matter of having all of that on deck and having it in a folder on your computer
Hmm.
or on your phone, so you can reference it, especially when you have a specific work that you're doing that's in public. You brought up what came up for you in this research, just something that stood out. Something that stood out for me is a couple of things, but what you were talking about, it made me think about the accession. Is that how you pronounce
Oh,
the word, right?
actually, I was going to ask you if you knew, because I never saw that term before.
I've seen the term, but I haven't ever said the word. So I'm like, ooh, let me just
Yeah.
look at dictionary.com. But with that vocabulary term, which means the permanent removal of a work from an art collection, permanent removal of art from a collection. We didn't have this in our notes, but I'm gonna put it in the chat and ask our audience, has anyone actually experienced that with their work?
Yeah.
Has it been removed?
Yeah, the article that I had found for Americans for the Arts, called Removing Public Artworks Process and Policies Are Key. It had two examples of two policies. I think both were in California. I'm pretty sure one was in San Francisco, but it had two examples of these cities' policies for when they need to remove a piece of art. I did not find one for DC,
Mm.
but that's where I found that term, and I was like, "Oh, interesting." Um, I've never heard that term before, but it seems like it can also be applied to like, like a public work piece. For example, if one building had like a couple of statues as part of, you know, what was the word you said? Like the aesthetics, like they were amplifying the aesthetics of this building. I don't
Oh,
remember.
yes, yes. Some of
But
those.
that is a collection of works. So if they decide, oh, we want to expand this building over here, but this statue's in the way, you know, there's that runs into all sorts of issues about
That's the waiving of the right.
that, and that's what I was looking into exactly. Like, but it sounds like from my research, they actually have to, I say they very generally here, it could be totally different place to place, but from my research, it sounded like you actually are supposed to get the artist to sign a waiver that says they are waiving their right. So it's not necessarily assumed. They're supposed to actually agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the right thing to do, right? That
Right,
sounds like
right.
the right thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's why I was like, wait, but I couldn't find confirmation on whether or not you is just having them sign a waiver like a nice gesture or like is it legally required or is it under that bill, is it actually assumed, like is it just, yeah, no, you like if we got to expand this building, we can destroy your
Yeah.
stuff. It's like
Since it's the feds, I feel like it's like we have it in this bill, this act. It says this is what it is, and so that means you automatically agree to it because it's in the act. That's what it is. It doesn't say we have to uh have the artist grant us rights to remove it. It just says the artist, waives the rights. And then
right.
even with the Americans for the Arts, the article that we reviewed, removing public artworks process and policies are key. With the de-accessioning policies of these different states that they named in here, what the writer of this article said was that um, artists should be part of the process,
Yeah.
not that artists must be part of the process. So,
Yeah.
right, right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
No bueno, no bueno,
Yeah.
no bueno. And what you said about, and what we're both saying, just about learning and not knowing these things.
Yeah.
I'm a person who went to art grad school.
Hmm.
And this is something I think you need to be taught not only in grad school,
Thank you.
but in
Thank you. Yeah.
undergraduate. And this is what I share with my students. So, this information that we're learning, I'm taking it back to my students. Like,
100%.
for
Thank you.
example, for example, the Artist Rights Society, right? Free membership. This is a visual artist collecting society. They take a 70-30 split, 30%. They handle your artwork in terms of where it is in the world, who is acquiring it, if it's being reproduced illegally, etc. And I went down a rabbit hole, Daddy. This was something that, it's not a rabbit hole, actually, it's directly connected. Because if you have this resource, and what in my cursory research, because I'm going to further research this organization, they seem to have great reviews for artists, to be able to have a place where you know that your art is going to be managed, and that if something comes up like the accession, they can help with that, or because
Hmm.
they need to know that. So that whole idea of the artist should be a part of it with them, I think it's like you have to be part of it. If you
Hmm.
don't tell us, then that's a problem. right?
That's a great resource. I didn't know about that.
So, oh, we
I,
have some stuff in the chat.
what's happening?
Let me see. So one of our guests says, does deaccession, how often does deaccession happen to murals on public buildings or private buildings?
Right now, it's happening every day. Every damn
Being
day.
permanently,
Yeah.
permanently
Yeah.
removed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's happening. Well, and I'm wondering too, like maybe it's just been happening frequently, but it's like I'm seeing it more in the media right now. But no, I have suspicions it's happening a lot right now because there's this wave of silencing voices. And this is one of the best ways to do it. This is a great way to silence voices. That's what it
It's,
is. Whitewashing
yeah.
is silencing so many voices, not just the artist's expression. It's a community. It's much bigger than that. It's representing a whole idea and philosophy.
Boy, oh boy.
I do want to say though, I want to make sure because we've been talking a lot about visual art, and as a performer, um, like I have done murals and wheat pasting and stuff before, but like most of my experience is with music, it's with theatrics. So I've actually been thinking a lot about busking and what are like the legal what are the rights as a busker if you start busking in a public space, like for example there's noise ordinances, so kind of going back to like what are the steps you should take as an artist, like research but like who is it you're supposed to talk to? It might not be the DC Metropolitan Police, it might be like as Janet said the National Park Service, but also you know where to get the correct permits to figure out is there a noise ordinance? Because, for example, in DC, there's a noise ordinance between like 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. or something like that, but not like during the day. It just says it cannot, what did it say? It can't disrupt work. And I'm like, that's pretty vague. Like a lot, anyone could easily argue, oh, your music is disrupting my job. You know, now I can't function. Like, so I'm like, that's not, that I think it needs to be more specific than that. But like researching that, knowing what that is, where you can busk, where you can't. And
Can you
it might,
explain busking?
oh, sorry. More context again. I should not assume everyone knows what busking is. This is when you're performing in the streets. It could, and it's usually music, but it could be like miming. It could be anything theatrical, juggling. For me, it's been predominantly music. And I only one time ran into an issue actually, because I did my research and was pretty good about figuring out where I could perform where I would not need a permit because I just didn't want to deal with permits. Now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, you know what? I want to get a permit for everything. Like, honestly, that's where I'm at. If I think there's going to be more than 25 people, I'm going to go get a permit. You know, that's just how I am now. But back then I was like very, even extra more intimidated than I am now by the whole process. So I was like, I'm going to avoid it as much as I can and go to spaces where I don't have to worry about there being too many people. And that was the one time where some police came. I was playing some music with two other guys, and we built such a crowd. It was too many people, and it was during the pandemic. And so the officers were scared about people being too close together, even though I felt like everyone was being very respectful of not being too close to each other. That was the only time we ran into an issue. And they actually were super cool about it. They were like, hey, we like your music too, but this is not safe anymore. And so that was the only time I ran into that kind of an issue. But um, yeah, like I think that for performers, you know, doing that same kind of research and assuming you're going to have more than 25 people, because wouldn't that be awesome actually if you had hundreds of people showing up for your cause? That would be awesome, right? Um, but the noise ordinance, yeah, that was like an annoying thing for me of like, wow, a lot of noise ordinances are actually pretty vague. Anyone could shut you down pretty easily just for that alone. I'm realizing generally it's pretty easy to shut anything down, but you have to not be like me and you have to be confident and stand up for yourself and say, no, this is my right. And I know I can do XYZ. You know, if an officer is telling me I've my decimals are too high and I'm too loud. I'm like, I really don't really know how much I can argue with that. Like, I don't know. Like, I just, that's where I'm like, I appreciate, that's going to be probably my takeaway today is like what you said, Janet, is having people who can advocate for you.
And then
Having my
when
lawyer friend, hey, talk to them for me because I suck at this so much. I'm not gonna lie, I get panicked. I get panicked when I see an
mm,
officer. And when I saw this thing in the news recently about this poor girl that got, it was actually a year ago that happened, but finally their court case just finally completed. But she was having a horrible panic attack when these police officers pulled her over, and they obviously saw her panic and then they freaked out and panicked. And I was like, why do we not have any training in this of like, this girl is clearly having a panic attack, you should know how to approach this person and de-escalate and calm her, you know, like so that she got shot in the back. This
mm,
ultimately ended with her getting shot in the back, and it started with her having a panic attack. And honestly, I've gotten way better, but yeah, since I was a kid,
mm.
I might have gotten a really bad ticket one time when I was in my youth. And it's because I had a panic attack. It's because I freaked out. I completely
What
freaked out and started
I
driving away from the
don't wonder
cops
what her.
because I was not thinking clearly.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Anyhow,
And I wonder
sorry,
what
I'm
her
going in.
name is. No, no, no.
I'll look it
This
up
I
real quick.
wonder what her name is so we can share her name. And
Um,
y- look, you know yourself, right? So if officers are approaching you or they're telling you that you need to stop doing something, and you know what your rights are, but you also know, okay, I may not be able to handle this well, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stand down and I'm gonna deal with this in another way, and in another legal way, right? The best that you can. We don't know how these people are going to react. We don't know how officers are going to react because we have such bad run-ins with officers. Again, not saying that all police officers are bad,
right.
but we need to do what we can to stay alive, right? And even when we do what we can and we follow the rules, that doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter oftentimes. We know that. We've seen it. We know people who've died because some officer was just wanting to kill someone that day.
Yeah.
Got trigger happy, didn't care. However, still having that understanding of who we are and what we need to do, I think is necessary for us to be able to live our lives, stay alive,
Hmm.
and do the work that we do.
I
And
found, oh, sorry.
okay, go ahead. No,
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say I
Go.
found her name, Jasmine Gayo. Gayo.
Gaio.
I think it's Gao. I
So
honestly don't know how to pronounce
did she passed away?
No, she survived and there was a huge
Okay.
settlement. Yeah, it
Okay.
was,
Okay.
but that's crazy.
Wow.
The whole story is crazy. Yeah.
Wow. So many different factors that go into what we can do as artists. And I know we're over our time, but something you said just made me think about the factor of being male and being non-white because you named Bansky, and we also talked about another. Oh, and I thought about JR, the French artist who does the wheat pasting, who does
Mm-hmm.
the images on walls, and them being able to do this, right? Um, and if someone else who is not male
Mm-hmm.
and not white or European,
Mm-hmm.
would you be able to do this in the same way
Mm-hmm.
without the
Mm-hmm.
same problems?
Yeah.
That came to mind when you were saying that. Okay, so
I'm gonna say one last thing. I want people to know in the resources, I'm also gonna put in there, um, I would imagine most people who are listening to our podcast probably already have this, but it's basically just the ACLU list of your rights when you're at a protest or list of your rights when you're organizing a protest. So Like, what do you do? What do you say if a cop approaches you? What do you do? What do you say if you see something? Oh, and that was one last piece of advice too. If you are having your piece removed, or if someone is trying to stop your production, to document everything, video document everything, which most people do automatically now, but just making sure, like, did you get an image of that badge on them? You know what I mean? Like, did you get like all the damage done to the artwork, possibly to your instruments, to whatever, just make sure you document everything.
Our audience member just said that too.
Oh, really? Good.
In this case, it's best to just document the situation and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, that's, again, because I don't want to get arrested. That's what I tend to be when I'm like, okay, okay, I don't put up much of a fight. Um, but
and
you know
and
what? I will be honest too. When I was like wheat pasting, for example, I had one guy with me, young black man. I didn't want to put him in any extra danger either. I was like, okay, we're done. I was one facilitating this project. And when I felt like, okay, we're good, we're done. You know, I, I'm not just thinking about me as well. You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
Especially if I'm the one in charge, if I'm producing this whole thing, it's like, nope, I don't want to see where this goes,
right. Exactly, exactly, exactly. We have to be responsible and accountable, and that means taking care of not only ourselves but the people who are working with us. I like to add to those who are like, we don't know who Banksy is.
Oh no.
We do know, like we know, like we
Yeah.
we know who he is.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant
uh,
like people are being like, wait, who's Banksy? Okay, I see what you're saying
oh
now. I see
no,
what you're
yeah,
saying now.
because he was like incognito. He no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, but all right. So wow, what are our takeaways for today?
Well, I told you mine. What's your takeaway?
Oh my gosh, can you remind me of your takeaway, please?
Like, I always think of Toy Story. Do you have your moving buddy? It's like, do you have your well articulate, eloquent, legal, de-escalating friend with you, buddy with you? So
Okay.
that's what I'm going to start thinking about, is like, I know my insecurities and weakness in this area. I need to be better about having that person with me who can do that job for me, and who likes to do that job too. Some people like that. And I actually have one friend recently who, new friend, who she's been working at the community garden with me. I won't say her name, but I'm pretty sure we're going to have her on a podcast in the future, one of our study groups. But she's my new lawyer friend, and I'm very excited to start recruiting her for some
Okay.
of the projects.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Audience member said, we love Banksky's work. Yeah, I mean, I can dig it. I dig it. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so my takeaways, it really, it's what was said, one of the last things that was said. You said it and the audience member said it about documenting and just walking away. Again, you know who you are, you know if you can handle the situation. Even if you're confident and you know your rights, you see that this situation is not going to go into the correct space,
Hmm.
document and walk away. That's and slowly.
Yeah.
Like no, seriously, like watch your back, as they say.
Yeah.
The other thing, know the laws and converse with lawyers. To your point about your lawyer friend, know the laws in your state, and
Yes.
make sure you read the amendments to those laws, right? When they make the adjustments,
Yeah.
and then speak to lawyers and ask them to synthesize it for you and put it in, regular vernacular, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to the law talk.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not afraid to say my dummy language. Dumb it down for me, please.
um, and then with your artwork, it's just something I was thinking about. Make sure you document your collectors and where your work is. And if you can look into the Artist Rights Society,
Hmm.
look into Artist Rights Society, in a matter of how to keep your work organized in public spaces. Yeah, and the last thing is continue to do your work. It makes a difference. That's
Amen.
all I got. All right. So,
And that's
uh,
that continuing to do the work. If you have to halt, you can come back to it later. You can do it somewhere else. You can do it in a
yep.
different way. It's not like the process has ended, the journey has ended. In fact, that might be what gets the attention that it needs, is because you keep having to retry at multiple locales, you know.
That pivot. That's right,
Pivot,
Granny.
man, the word of the year, pivot.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we close
Nah.
out?
I feel like I'm looking at the notes here and I'm like, God, there was so much more that we could have talked about. But
Well,
I feel like we should just do this again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, with that being said, we are definitely going to do this again. If you are not already following us on Instagram, if you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, please follow us. Please subscribe to stay informed on the next special episode of What Ya Gonna Do. All right. So we'd like to remind our listeners that the podcast is funded by the two of us and your donations. So please help us keep our podcast going by making a donation through our PayPal link in the show notes below. And with that being said, thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
supporting us and being here. Peace.